Hi there. Looking here at 1977 album by Ash. Ash are a Northern Irish band from Northern Ireland, I think from Belfast, and they would, I guess, would call pop rock, punk, a little bit punk, but yeah, I guess rock in the general sense. This album came out in 1996. Yeah, 96, and it was pretty big here. And when I said big, wasn't selling like huge amounts, but it was heard them all on the radio, saw them a lot on TV, um, and I think enough people bought it where it was relatively popular. So they said it was called 1977. I've seen a few different things. One of them was apparently they're really big Star Wars fans. So the band is what? Tim Wheeler is the singer, guitarist, um, and main songwriter. The bassist is Mark Hamilton or Mark something. I think that's Mark Hamilton. And the drummer is I should probably show the picture of them. So it's Tim Wheeler, singer, guitarist, Mark Hamilton, and that guy there, I think his name is Rick. He's the drummer. I should have probably checked this first, shouldn't I? Apparently, they all really like Star Wars, and 1977 was the year Star Wars was released. Or was it 76? I don't actually know. Well, regardless, they really like Star Wars, and there's a in the first song of the no, it was 77. The first song on the album, Lose Control, it starts off with a sample of a TIE fighter, you know, that really high pitched drone like that they make as they kind of fly past in the movie. The engines of the TIE fighter. That starts off the very first sound of the very first song on the album. Um, so apparently 1977 was a reference to that. It was also the year that Tim Wheeler was born. Don't know if any of the other members were born 77 as well. But yeah, so it's a pretty good album. I think it's a pretty solid album. It's got a lot of good songs. It had quite a few singles on it as well. At least they were released here as singles. So Lose Control, like I said, that's the one that starts off with the Star Wars sample, and then it's got this really like fast guitar, kind of like an ascending. I'm trying to think if it's ascending or descending. Anyway, the guitar kind of starts off quite quickly, and then that song was licensed to Gran Turismo on PlayStation 1. So PlayStation 1, that first PlayStation, 25, coming, I guess it'll be 30 years soon, that was kind of had a strange place in youth culture. Nowadays, video games are so part of everyday life for almost every kid. And they've so infiltrated the culture that they're just seen as normal. They're part of seen as part of, I shouldn't say mainstream because they've always been mainstream, but when I was growing up, video games, playing video games, computer games, even like video game consoles, still had the whiff of being a nerd or a geek or whatever you want to call it. But it was starting to change with the PlayStation. Now I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking maybe I'm overstating it a little bit. Anyway, in the 90s, I say that it started to change a lot. And the PlayStation, I think, had a big part in changing that because the games were so good and there was such a step up from the 8-bit and 16-bit systems like the Sega Master System or the NES or the Super NES or the what we called the Mega Drive, I think it was called the Genesis in America. The PlayStation was such a huge step up from those that it appealed to a much broader chunk of society, adults and older teens, and so that game Gran Turismo and that song. There was other songs on it. The soundtrack of that game it feels like it had a big part in my youth. Even though I never owned a PlayStation, at least when I was a teenager, I didn't. a lot of my friends did, and we used to have some. I remember going around to my mate's house and stay up all night and playing PlayStation, or you'd hire it out. You go to a video store, VHS, rental, like Blockbuster or whatever you want to call it, and you could hire the system and a few games. I remember doing that as well. Anyway, getting a bit off track here. That song "Lose Control" was on the Gran Turismo soundtrack. When you're playing the game, driving cars around the track, you could hear Ash. Goldfinger. Now that's a great song. That was released as a single. That had strings in it, like orchestrated strings. And I heard that the guy who wrote the string sections, it was written by the producer Owen Morris, and Owen Morris famously did the first few Oasis albums. Tim Wheeler and the guy who did the strings for Massive Attack's Unfinished Sympathy, which is an absolutely brilliant song. Has a lot more strings in it, obviously. Kind of the main basis of that song is the strings. Goldfinger the strings are kind of more in the background and not as prominent. But yeah, I just found that to be interesting that they use that same guy. Girl from Mars was also a single, so those 2 and 3 both singles. Girl from Mars, a much more poppy song. I'd Give You Anything, God in the Dream, just album tracks of both good songs. Though Kung Fu was a single. I remember they used that in the Jackie Chan movie Rumble in the Bronx on the ending credits. It's a really catchy, almost like a punk song. And they reference Jackie Chan in the song. Da, 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 da. He's in love with you. I'm trying to. Fu Manchu, Jackie Chan. They don't say Bruce Lee. No, they do say Bruce Lee. Anyway, it's kind of like they're going through all like famous kung fu icons and including them in the song. Oh yeah, another single, which also had strings, I think. Uh, Let It Flow, Innocent Smile, Angel Interceptor. Was that a single? It might have been. If it wasn't a single, it was a famous song that I remember hearing on the radio. Oh, it was a single. So there was 5 singles from the album: Kung Fu, Girl from Mars, Angel Interceptor, Goldfinger, and Oh Yeah. 5 from 12 singles, and one of them is used for a video game, so it became so famous that it might as well have been a single. So it was a pretty successful album. Obviously, they're only releasing singles when they're trying to push the album when they feel it's got more life. So it got to number 1 in Britain, got to number 14 in New Zealand, number 18 in Australia, 5 in Scotland, a few other kind of European countries, but notably nothing in the US, which is something I've talked about in another video, how these certain bands come out of Britain and every now and then a few of them will kind of break America and do some okay sales there, and then others seem to sell really well in Britain, get a number 1 album, sell hundreds of thousands of albums, maybe even millions. Then they'll break also, like I've said, former British colonies, part of the Commonwealth, like Australia and New Zealand, sometimes Canada. But Canada is more tied to America, I think, and culturally. But then they don't really anything beyond that. And it's kind of interesting why do they break into New Zealand and Australia, the other side of the world, but they don't manage to America? I guess America is just such a huge cultural market that has so much going on that the competition is so much higher that it's so much of their own homegrown stuff that dominates. It's harder for even British acts to break into America. But yeah, it's a good album. It's something when I listen to it, it feels like it takes me back to the time of my youth, of that time, 1996, 1997. I mean, they came and toured here around that time, and they did a tour, double bill with Garbage. I didn't go, but that would have been a great show. Garbage and Ash. They played the North Shore Event Centre in Glenfield. If you're from Auckland or ever visited, and they are actually touring Auckland. They're doing a world tour at the moment. They're due in Auckland, either coming up soon or they've been. But I was tossing up whether to go. I would actually have liked to go on to see them, but there's another band coming that I'm actually going to see tomorrow night. So I was tossing up between going to see Ash. The other band I'm going to see is a French Canadian band called Men I Trust. They're much younger than Ash. They're younger than I am. They're I guess what you call dream pop, indie indie rock, dream pop kind of band. And I thought the price for the tickets was about the same between Ash and Men I Trust, but I felt I wanted to support a younger band, a band that's kind of at the beginning of their career, whereas Ash has been going for close to 30 years. They had quite a lot of success in the 90s, early 2000s, and I thought, yeah, I think, and just remember another thing. I saw Ash, and just coming back to me now, Ash played the Big Day Out Festival in 1998. No, 99. The one where Korn played. So yeah, 1999. They played the afternoon slot. So I've actually seen Ash before. Because I remember sitting my friend in the stand. It was in the afternoon. And they played that song I just talked about, Lose Control, the one from Gran Turismo. And when they played it, it's like, oh, the song from Gran Turismo. So that's another reason why. But I didn't even think about that. That's only just come back to me just now, talking about it on the video, that I actually have seen Ash at a festival show. Obviously, when you see a band at a festival show, it's not the same as seeing them always, unless you get right down the front and try and like. A lot of the time, you're sitting in the stands and just taking a rest, or at least that's what I do sometimes. And so some of those bands you don't get the full live experience. Um, but anyway, it's a pretty great album. I think it's a very solid album that has a lot of catchy songs, a lot of good songs, and you can hear the youth in it. They were very young when they made this. I think they were only between like 18 or 19 years old when they wrote and recorded this album. Just young lads from Northern Ireland, and they did, I think, better than most people would expect. They went on after this to have continued to expect. The album after this wasn't so popular. Nuclear Sounds. I remember that didn't actually do very well. But then the one after, I think, Free All Angels, which is the one that had Shining Light on it, and Burn Baby Burn, that did pretty well. That actually may have done as well, if not better, than yeah. So it did about the same success wise as 1977. So they had their share of success. Nowadays, I'm sure they're still recording new music. It's not as popular, but they still manage to be touring overseas, far away in little old New Zealand. So can't be doing that badly. But yeah, I recommend this album. Solid pop rock punk with a British element, or I shouldn't say British. That will rub some people the wrong way there with Northern Ireland. Yeah, but less said the better on that, I'll just say. Anyway, recommended, good album. Thank you for watching.